In a new interview with CNN, the Senate Minority Leader, Mitch McConnell, really trying to thread the needle. He tells CNN's Manu Raju he's mostly on the same page as Donald Trump heading into the 2022 midterms. But there is one giant divide: how McConnell thinks Republican candidates should talk about the 2020 election. Manu Raju joins us now live with more. This is one of the most fascinating, if not the most fascinating relationship in politics right now. Walk us through the conversation, including that potential collision.
Yeah, that's right, because remember, in the aftermath of the January 6th insurrection, Mitch McConnell voted to acquit Donald Trump, but then went on the Senate floor and called him responsible for the attack on this Capitol. That has led to a months-long barrage of attacks launched by Donald Trump against Mitch McConnell, and a number of Republicans flatly concerned about what this would mean for their efforts to take back the Senate majority, keeping their party on the same page. Now, talking with Senator McConnell through all these dynamics, it's clear he believes that he and Trump are actually on the same page on a number of these key races. They've gotten behind similar candidates in Nevada and in Georgia. He's staying out of a Republican primary in Alabama, and a primary that Donald Trump has endorsed. He has also the notes that they are on a different page on Alaska. The Senate Republican Lisa Murkowski running for re-election there, despite her vote to convict Donald Trump. But that is a state that will almost certainly stay in Republican hands. And he also notes, John, that he is good with Republican candidates in a number of key races and the primaries that are emerging, messy primaries in Pennsylvania, North Carolina, and Ohio, though notes that he is watching very closely a potential problem in Missouri, a Republican candidate there that Republicans are nervous about. The former governor, Eric Greitens, could emerge from that race. McConnell is not ruling out the idea of engaging in that primary if it turns haywire. Now, what he is warning about is the talking about what happens in the 2020 elections. Donald Trump has used his lie that the election is stolen is a litmus test of sorts to get Republican candidates to agree with them in order to give him their endorsement. But when talking about Republican candidates who are embracing that election falsehood, McConnell had this warning. He said, it's important for candidates to remember we need to respect the results of our democratic process unless the court system demonstrates that some significant fraud occurred that would change the outcome. Now, he also is discounting the impact that the fight in Congress over expanding voting rights that we have seen all throughout this past year, as well as in the last couple of weeks here, will have any impact at all. It doesn't think it'll have a single impact on a specific Senate race. And John, even though he and McConnell and Trump at this moment may be on the same page on the candidates, he is still trying to court McConnell is two governors, Larry Hogan, Doug Ducey, to run for those races in Arizona and in Maryland. And of course, Trump has gone after particularly Ducey, so potentially they could be on the opposite sides in critical races this fall.
Manu, stand by, because let's bring in some other reporters. This is delicious, so let's talk about it. With me to share their reporting and their insights, CNN's Dana Bash, Politico's Nicholas Wu, and NPR's Aisha Rasco. Dana, let me start with you. You know Leader McConnell quite well. This is what he told Manu about the Alaska race. We're going to be in Alaska helping Lisa Murkowski, and that's the one place where the former president and I have a disagreement. He calls it the one place. But to the point Manu was just making, if McConnell is successful and he can get Governor Ducey in the Arizona race, and if he is successful and he can get former Governor Hogan, in the Maryland race, especially in the case of Doug Ducey, that's one of Trump's hand grenade states, if you will. He thinks Governor Ducey was supposed to help him cheat in Arizona, and he didn't. So McConnell wants to be ho-hum. I'm mostly on the same page with Donald Trump, but that is going to be sorely tested.
And they're very much connected, John. My understanding in talking to Republican sources is that a big reason, if not the big reason, Governor Ducey isn't already in the Senate race is because he understands the incoming he would get undoubtedly from former President Donald Trump, because, as you said, Ducey deigned to stand up for the truth and the rule of law and not bend to his election lies. And that is a very real dynamic. For Larry Hogan, it's a bit different because he's a very popular governor in a blue state. And it's more of a question about whether he wants to be a senator after being a governor for some time. Just, if I may, very quickly, there's one line in here that Manu got, which is just, first of all, this interview is fantastic. I encourage everybody to read it. But when McConnell's talking, it's to this point about having winnable candidates. Mm-hmm. He's talking about 2010, where there was a huge wave and Republicans in the House took over. In the Senate, they didn't make it. And he said it took us 6 years to climb out of that hole because they lost Republican primaries with candidates who the candidates who could win statewide lost in the primaries, and that's what he's trying to avoid here.
That's what he's trying to avoid. He remembers Claire McCaskill out of Missouri. That one state sticks with him quite well. Aisha, one of the interesting things is what will the issue terrain be? We understand, COVID fatigue is going to be the number one issue. The economy will be along with that in the campaign. But McConnell makes the case that Democrats will get nothing on this big fight over voting rights. He told Manu this: it's just as likely to be a liability for Democrats as it is for us. I think I can pretty confidently say we won't lose any elections over that issue anywhere in the country. And he goes on to list other issues that people are concerned with: the border, Afghanistan, COVID, and the like. The Biden White House, I assume, disagrees, but this will be one of the big tests.
Well, I mean, I think they're talking about really things in two different ways. No, I don't think Republicans are going to lose because of the voting rights issue. The argument that Democrats are making is that the actions that are being taken in these states will help Republicans by discouraging Democrats, right? Or by discouraging more people from voting, by making it more difficult to vote. When you have less people voting, that will benefit Republicans. I do think that it could be a liability for Democrats, absolutely, because in many ways it has become a litmus test for Democratic supporters whether Biden is doing enough to live up to his promises. They said they are thinking about he hasn't done voting rights. He said that this is essential for democracy, and it hasn't happened. So I do think that it could be a liability, but it's really in different ways that we're looking at the voting rights issue.
And Nicholas, McConnell is unique in some ways in that he is a national Republican figure who has survived a constant fight with Donald Trump. And you could make the case he's even stronger now in a position to be reelected as Republican leader. He told Manu this: well, I'm going to be running again in November, and we'll see what happens later, not even ruling out perhaps seeking another term as leader down the road. That is remarkable. If you talk to Senate Republicans, Trump has several times tried to get somebody to make a run at McConnell, and Trump has failed.
Absolutely. I mean, McConnell seems to have only strengthened his position here. He's really tamped down some issues within his caucus. He's helped ward off the right flank here. And despite talk about what some folks on the Hill call the battle of the three Johns, right? John Barrasso, Thune, and Cornyn, McConnell's lieutenants, who at some point thought might be folks who could succeed him. McConnell looks like he wants to stay there, and to have been able to not only try to bury the hatchet with Trump here, but also stand behind an incumbent who Trump has repeatedly targeted, Lisa Murkowski in Alaska. It really shows the skill at which McConnell has handled this situation.
And Manu, let me circle back to you to close. He's also very skilled at interviews. He's a very tough guy to crack. He's only going to say what he wants to say. So part of the challenge with Mr. McConnell is trying to translate, based on your experience, A, what he wouldn't say, and B, how he chose his words. On this idea that he can keep this détente with Trump throughout 2022, does he really believe it, or does even Mitch McConnell kind of have his fingers crossed?
I think he's got his fingers crossed on here. He doesn't exactly know ultimately what Donald Trump will do. Of course, he has not spoken to Donald Trump in more than a year, and they're simply on the same page just by happenstance in some ways. In Pennsylvania, for instance, one candidate dropped out there, Sean Parnell, who had Donald Trump's endorsement at the time. In Georgia, for instance, Herschel Walker, McConnell was concerned about him initially. Donald Trump got behind him. Now Mitch McConnell is behind him. So he's uncertain how this will play out. But, John, make no mistake about it. His comment to the Republican candidates to embrace the election results, that was by no mistake. He wanted to make that very clear that that is an issue that Republicans should get behind to trust the elections.
And we will watch to see if the former president decides to raise his hand on that point. Fascinating interview, fascinating months ahead of us as we go through primary season.